Hello and welcome to today's Career Month program. My name is Adam Sylvain and I work with the Alumni Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled Strategies for Relaunching Your Career. Today we will hear from Executive Coach Margaret Chan, whose 25 years of experience recruiting for global search firms Spencer Stuart and Korn Ferry, as well as her individual coaching practice, have provided invaluable insights into effective strategy for career relaunchers. She has led webinars on this topic for multiple universities, including Columbia and UCLA. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to cede the floor to Margaret.
Thank you, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. It's an honor to be presenting this program jointly with the University of Chicago. Relaunching your career after career breaks has unique challenges that are different from typical job seekers. So we will discuss strategies to address them and an action plan for your relaunch. I am passionate about helping professionals relaunch their careers. I have 2 children myself, and I know the demands of having a career and raising a family. And I also understand when these 2 demands conflict and why both women and men step away from their careers temporarily. But then life happens and they end up staying out longer than they might have expected. Our discussion today will be targeted primarily to women, but the advice is also helpful to both men and women. I will discuss why now is a good time to relaunch, so you can feel more confident in relaunching now. In our time together, I'd like you to think about what you want to focus on during our presentation. What is most important to you in your relaunch? What is holding you back? What do you need help with the most? Why is now a good time for relaunchers? Because there are some current shifts in company trends and hiring practices. Companies are focusing more on gender diversity and the shortage of women in middle and senior management. So they have targeted a new pool of high-quality talent to recruit from. Highly educated women who had successful first careers before taking their career breaks. So they want you and your talents to come back. I will share these companies' strategies of how they are targeting you and how these strategies will become your strategies. The topics we'll be discussing today will be identifying your challenges, developing practical strategies, creating a step-by-step action plan, and addressing challenges. And we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. Let's talk about some of the challenges you may be facing in relaunching. How do you figure out what career to pursue? How do you position your career gap? How do you make your resume more current? How would you like to address ageism? How do you actually do the job search? How do you build more confidence so you can feel more connected to your former professional self? And how do you get the support you need? What career should you pursue? How do you figure that out? First, what are your reasons for relaunching? We'll do a quick poll here. Adam, can you please launch our first poll?
Sure.
So are you relaunching for financial reasons? Are you looking for more challenge or mental stimulation? Do you have more time to spend now because your children are older? Or is it a combination of some of these reasons? Think about where a career fits into your life now. It may be a different place from when you were last working. It's important to do some self-discovery and exploration to understand your reasons for wanting to relaunch, because it will affect the type of career you choose. For example, if you are now the primary breadwinner, financial reasons may be more important to you than other reasons. So maybe joining a not-for-profit may not be the best option.
We have our results from the first poll. Are you able to see those, Margaret?
Hold on one second. I am not.
Okay, let me read them for you. So we have 34% of our respondents said that their motivation for relaunching is financial. 19% are looking for more challenge. Just 2% said they have more time. 30% desire to spend time in a more meaningful way. And 15% voted other in this poll.
Great. As you can see, you all have a variety of reasons of why you want to go back to work. So it's important to make sure you're clear about what are some of your more important reasons, because it does affect what kind of career you end up pursuing. Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome. We lost your presentation. It was up just a moment ago. There it is. It's back.
Oh, good. Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm having a little trouble advancing. There we go. Okay. What are some strategies for relaunching? Adam, can we do another poll now? So
sure.
we understand some of the different strategies our participants can use in launching their career. So you can return to the same industry and function, or you could keep the same industry but change the function, or you could keep the same function but change industries, or you could change both the industry and the function. The first strategy is for you to return to the same industry and function. This is the easiest reentry strategy because you clearly have highly relevant experience. If this is what you want, then I recommend that you first identify the companies you're interested in. Who are the major players now? Who are the new competitors that have entered since you've been on your break? And get knowledgeable about the changes that have occurred in the industry while you were away. We'll talk later more about how to get current. A second strategy is to keep the same industry but change the function. This is very effective if your function has changed dramatically while you were away. For this strategy, you can identify critical competencies from your first career that are transferable and relevant to the new career. For example, I coached a relauncher who was 53 years old. She had been out of the workforce for 15 years. While she was on her career break, technology changed dramatically how trading is being done now. But in her previous career as a trader, she managed the risk of her trading portfolio. So I coached her to broaden her definition of her competencies from being a trading expert to also having risk management expertise. So instead of going back to trading, she leveraged her risk experience into a new growth function called risk management. And from my previous career as an executive recruiter, I know that banks have increased regulatory requirements now. So as a result, the risk function continues to have robust hiring. So the important thing is position yourself for growth areas. Identify the transferable skills for growth functions and growth industries. A third strategy is to keep the same function, but you change the industry. So if you were in a marketing in a consumer goods company before in your first career, you can reposition yourself from being a consumer goods expert to a marketing expert who could work in multiple industries. So how about leveraging your marketing expertise to a growth industry that is also consumer facing, which is what your previous career in consumer goods was? Think of companies like Apple or the services sector like Airbnb or Lyft. Those are growth industries that could use a lot of marketing expertise. A fourth strategy is to change both your industry and your function. This is clearly the hardest strategy because you don't have highly relevant prior experience. So it's really important, if you're changing both your industry and function, to identify the transferable skills that would be valued in the industry and function that you're targeting. So how do you transition to a new career? We just talked about your competencies and skills from your first career. Let's identify some common ones that are some common skills that are transferable, such as P&L management, strategic skills, leadership or team management skills, financial acumen, operational strengths in getting things done and done effectively. There are many more. Any of these skills can be used in lots of jobs and functions. Sometimes it's a little difficult to assess your skills by yourself. There are lots of different ways to do this. You can do it with a friend, or with a colleague, former colleague, or with a peer. Or if you want more objectivity and privacy, perhaps you could work with a coach too. It's important to get clear about your skills, but also be honest about which skills you really want to use now. For example, you may have been very skilled at managing teams, but you may want more autonomy now, in which case being an individual contributor role may fit your current life better than managing a team. So just think about what skills you really want to use and how a career will fit into your life. The next step is developing a target company list. Once you've identified the kind of career you want and your transferable skills, a target list, company list is really important. Create a list of companies of where you really want to work, and also include those companies where you have contacts, even though you're not sure if these companies are right for you. This is a critical step because the list of companies will become the foundation for your networking strategy. So regardless of whether you're staying in the same industry or the same function or changing, a list of target companies will help you focus your efforts. So how do you do the job search? Let's take a step-by-step approach with an action plan of how to actually execute the job search. Let's look at resources for relaunchers. There are resources that are dedicated for relaunchers. And one of them is a particularly good strategy for you. And that is career reentry programs. They are often called returnships or return internships. They are often offered by large companies interested in gender diversity. They are the most welcoming to relaunchers because they are targeted directly to you. And you do not have to explain your career gap because by definition, you had to have had a career gap in order to apply for these returnships. Returnships are really mid-career internships for professionals. They are paid internships and are generally 2 to 3 months long. They're usually offered once or twice a year, and they are competitive. They have these returnships in multiple locations of a company, not just at company headquarters. They include training, updating skills, mentoring, and support. They're open to both men and women, and generally, as I said earlier, require that you had a career break for family reasons. During the returnship, you'll get exposed to many parts of the company. And if you do well in your returnship, you may be offered a full-time position. I recently coached a relauncher who was 52 years old. She had a career break of 14 years. I recommended that she apply to returnships. She got one at Morgan Stanley. After completing the returnship, she was hired full-time as a vice president. She was thrilled to be working full-time after a 14-year break. So which companies have returnships? The financial services industry started the first ones, and Goldman Sachs actually trademarked the term returnship because they were the first company. So other financial services organizations that have returnships include Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Credit Suisse, UBS, MetLife, MasterCard, Fitch Ratings, and Moody's. That's just a few. There are many more. Consulting firms also have them, such as A.T. Kearney, Booz Allen, Capgemini, and Deloitte. Consumer goods companies such as Pepsi, Johnson & Johnson, and Campbell Soup. Entertainment companies such as NBC Universal. The tech industry, other manufacturers such as General Motors and Cummins. The tech industry has IBM, Oracle, and LinkedIn. And there's a nonprofit called Path Forward. They started a returnship with 20 tech companies, including PayPal and GoDaddy. These are just a few that I could name. There are many more. You should research the companies you're interested in to see if they have one. Another resource is to look at professional websites dedicated to relaunchers. They typically partner with companies dedicated to gender diversity, and they're often organized by industry. They post professional jobs for relaunchers and relevant articles, and they also hold return to work conferences for relaunchers. iRelaunch is the largest relaunch website. It was started by a relauncher. You can register to be added to their mailing list for free. They have weekly emails about companies that are starting new returnships. They also let you know when some companies' returnships open up for applications each year. Another relaunch website is the Appraise Group. It's a fairly new group. It was just started about 2 years ago. And they also have job postings targeted to relaunchers. But take advantage of some of these resources. So let's talk about networking. How do you build an effective networking strategy? As we said earlier, you need a target list of companies. But first, let's talk about one of the big elephants in the room. I realize that some of you may not have kept in touch with some of your former colleagues and managers for a long time. Some of you may even feel awkward about it. But please, try to forgive yourself or be kind to yourself, because there is a bright side to not having seen your former colleagues for a long time. First of all, they don't know that you may have been a bit disconnected from your former professional self. And they are not aware that you may have experienced a bit of a hit in your confidence. They just remember you from when they worked with you before, when you were a smart, competent, and hardworking professional. That's their memory of you, almost frozen in time. So bring that smart and competent persona with you when you start your relaunch. Let's look at some potential groups for networking. Your former managers. They know what a strong performer you were. They are the most likely to rehire you. Email your former managers to let them know you are relaunching and ask to meet for coffee in their office. Don't ask for lunch unless they offer, because it may be too much of a time commitment. And lunches tend to get canceled more often than a 30-minute coffee. Ask your former manager, of course, for opportunities at their company, but also bring your target list with you and ask for introductions to your target companies. Your former managers may also suggest other companies that you hadn't thought of, maybe new competitors in the industry. Let's talk about another elephant in the room. Depending upon how long your break was, some of your former managers may have retired, but you should still contact them because they may still know people in the industry you can connect with. For example, you can ask for referrals to their former direct reports who are still at the company and who they may still be close to. Another group to contact is your former subordinates. Let's be realistic. Your former direct reports have moved farther along in their careers while you're on your career break. They may be in a good position to hire you now. So try not to let your ego get in the way. Or they can introduce you to others in the company. Again, bring your target list. You will find that the more you take your target list everywhere, the greater you can expand your contacts. Another group is former colleagues. They may be at lots of different companies now, which is good for you because they can help expand your network further at more companies. How about your friends? Do you have friends who work for companies who you're interested in? Or do you have friends who just seem to know a lot of people? Do you have other friends who are in lots of different businesses or social circles? Tell them all about your relaunch plans. How about your UC or graduate school classmates? Reconnect with them and let them know about your relaunch. Even if you may feel awkward at first, you'll be surprised about how receptive they could be. The easiest way to locate all of your former contacts is through LinkedIn. And finally, to broaden your networking, look at professional and industry associations in the ones you're interested in. Join and attend events. This will help you to get more current about the industry, and it will also give you a chance to start presenting yourself in a more business setting. Sorry about that. Here are some practical tips. Business cards. I know you're thinking everybody uses email now, so who needs a business card? But it's a good idea to get some printed, and let me explain why. They just have to have your name, your email, and cell phone, along with your LinkedIn profile address. Don't worry about the fact that you don't have a company or title on it. It shows you are more serious about your relaunch, and you will come across as more professional. And this is why you need the card. You can exchange cards with people you meet so you can follow up with them. You want to ask for their card, but then you need to have one to give back. And by asking for their card, you can follow up. It would also help the people you meet to remember you. Your cell phone. Make sure your cell phone has a professional message on it. And when you answer it, use your full name like you would in an office. You also need a LinkedIn profile because some companies or people you network with will look your profile up before they decide to meet with you. Your profile should reinforce or enhance your resume. It should have similar content as your resume, but in a shorter form. And I don't mean shorter in length so much as shorter sentences. It should have a professional presence. You don't need a professional photographer for your photo, but your photo should show you in a professional pose, and the photo should be recent. So how do you position your resume gap? First, let's do another poll to see how long your career break has been. Adam, can you please launch our third poll?
Sure.
So what kinds of activities have you been involved with during your gap? First, let's look at consulting work. Any type of consulting work or project work or contract work, whether it's paid or unpaid, should be listed as consulting experience in the business section of your resume. Even if it's unpaid, it still goes in the business section. The reality is no one's going to know it was unpaid because no one will be asking you. If you served on any boards, this also goes into consulting. How about pro bono work? For example, if you help friends if you help friends with their businesses, such as helping them start it, helping them find investors, or serving as advisors or on their boards. All of this goes into consulting. I bet many of you have done lots of volunteer work. This is an area that I find many relaunchers have the most uncertainty about where to put this experience. It depends. I say that it is usually not a good idea to put it in the beginning of your resume because you want the resume to focus on your business, the business skills you developed from your first career. How else can you update your work experience? One way is what I call strategic volunteering, meaning you volunteer your services to businesses. And this would be treated as consulting, unpaid consulting, but it is consulting. For example, one example is the Acceleration Project. It's a not-for-profit organization that sends professionals to assist local businesses with consulting services. Many of these professionals are on career breaks, like yourself. They function as pro bono consultants who work on a project basis. They develop strategies and recommend action plans to small businesses. You would add this to your resume as current consulting experience, not as volunteer work. I know a relauncher whose first career was in marketing at food companies. She took a 7-year break. During the last 2 years of her break, she planned her re-entry strategy. So she volunteered with the Acceleration Project doing small business consulting work as pro bono consulting. Then she applied for a returnship in consulting at A.T. Kearney. Her only consulting experience was this pro bono consulting work. She got the returnship at A.T. Kearney. She performed well on her returnship and was offered a full-time position as a consultant in the consumer goods practice. So she leveraged her food experience from her first career and updated her resume with this pro bono consulting. Another option is paid project-based work. There's an organization called Work. It's a job search platform that connects companies to professionals looking for flexible work situations. These are mostly part-time or contract positions. I know that most of you are likely to be looking for full-time positions, but doing this type of contract work will give you current work experiences. Another option is an organization called Catalan. They match professionals to do paid project-based work in a variety of functions and businesses. Another one is the Business Talent Group. They match consultants with companies looking for project-based work. How about professional staffing firms where you can get a temporary or project-based job? I'm not talking about being a temp receptionist. I am referring to a professional job in your function, such as a financial manager or a marketing manager. These positions will probably be more junior than what you did before, but it'll give you some current work experience. Again, all these options that I just described would be positioned as consulting on your resume. Let's talk about getting up to date, because this is important. As you know, it's easier to get current on business now because there's so much information online. You can get online subscriptions for business news. Always do internet research before any interviews or networking meetings. And always Google the people you are meeting and find their LinkedIn profiles. You can tap your close friends to help you get current with new acronyms, trends, and regulations. One of the most important things to communicate in an interview is that you're current with the industry. We will discuss more about interviewing later. While we're talking about the importance of getting current, here are other ideas for preparing for your relaunch. When you start your new career, most companies will expect you to be familiar with using the Microsoft Office suite of products. This includes Outlook, Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. If you need training or need to refresh your skills, Microsoft offers free training online on its website. But if you want more hands-on help, you can book training sessions at a Microsoft retail store for a fee. Let's talk about your career narrative, which some people call an elevator pitch. Having a compelling career narrative is important because it's your story of who you are, what you've done, and why you are here, and what you want to do next. It helps others to help you. Your career narrative should describe your former experience and what you want to do now. It should be strategic, clear, and succinct. It should be no more than 5 to 6 short sentences, and it should sound natural and use simple language with no jargon. The whole thing should be less than 30 seconds. It starts with a strategic summary of your first career. And then the middle is a 1-sentence factual statement of your career break with no details. And the end is a statement of your readiness to relaunch and what you want to do next. Let's go over a few examples so you know what I'm referring to. For me, my career narrative would sound something like this. I spent 25 years in executive search firms, working in executive recruiting for Spencer Stuart and Korn, Ferry, the global search firms. I coach executives who are making career transitions in a broad range of industries and functions. I did a lot of work with women in leadership. I am now an executive coach helping clients make career transitions. And one of my focus areas is working with women relaunching their careers. That took about 30 seconds, but it clearly communicated what I've done and what I want to do next and what my specialty is. Another example for relauncher I recently coached. We worked together on creating her career narrative. This was hers. I spent 15 years in equity research and portfolio management in JP Morgan and Citigroup. I took a career break to raise my family. During that time, I kept abreast of the industry by keeping in touch with former colleagues and attending industry meetings. I know that the Dodd-Frank Act had a big impact on global banking. I'm returning to my career now. I'm interested in opportunities in investment management. That took about 25 seconds. But let's look at this relauncher's example more closely. First, she summarized her first career by naming 2 functions she worked with, so she showed double experience in investment management. She then strategically named 2 former blue chip companies that she worked at, so it was quickly clear what she did before. She stated her career break without reminding anyone how long it was. She communicated how she stayed current. She shared some current knowledge about the industry, and she stated firmly that she was ready to return to work. She showed no hesitation. She clearly communicated what she wants to do next, but she kept it broad so she could be considered for multiple functions in investment management. It's important to create a compelling career narrative for yourself since it's probably been a while since you described your professional self. Okay, so far we've talked about a lot of things: resumes, networking, getting current, updating your work experience, and career narratives. Before joining us today, I'm sure some of you have probably thought about some of these steps of the relaunch process. But I'd like you to think about a few more things. Do you feel you have made the progress you want? What's holding you back from moving forward more? What obstacles are in your way that you can address? What do you need to help you break through? And do you have the resources and support you need? It's a new year. How do you want to do things differently? It's good to give these questions some thought so you can identify what support you need from your friends, family, as well as others to relaunch successfully. Let's talk about another elephant in the room, ageism. And I know this is a sensitive topic. And it's a topic with different approaches on how to address it. And I'm sure you've heard many different versions in terms of many different approaches. Regardless of which approach you choose, just be sure that you are comfortable with it. Because if you're not comfortable with it, it will show when you interview. In my experience as a former recruiter, I really do think that the best way to address ageism is to own it. I know some people suggest that you delete your college graduation year so companies can't figure out when you started working and what your age is. But most companies need to confirm your educational degrees, and colleges will not confirm degrees without a graduation year. So companies will ask you for your graduation year during some part of the interview process. I know some people think, oh, well, maybe if they don't know my age and they meet me first and I'm so compelling, they'll overlook it. Maybe, but on the other hand, it can give a different impression. And some suggest that deleting your earlier jobs because it shows when you started working. But please give this some thought. You already have a current career gap. You don't want to have to explain multiple career gaps. You want to show as many years of working as possible so that your current gap represents a smaller percentage of your total career. And if your early jobs are irrelevant to what you want to do now, just give it less space on your resume. Just have your company name, your former title, and the dates, and that's it. No description. And again, in my experience as a former recruiter, I find that leaving out your graduation year actually highlights your age more. Not because people know the number, but because by deleting it, it gives the impression that you are uncomfortable with your age. It conveys that you think that you are probably older than other candidates. So think about whether this is the first impression you want to give someone when all they've seen is your resume. Nothing addresses ageism better than having confidence. I think it's more effective to build your confidence by being clear about your strengths and your value to a company. This will help you to hide your discomfort. And never underestimate the power of your physical presentation in addressing ageism. So make sure your appearance is up to date. So if you're going to go back to work and wear a lot of the old clothes you had before, you may want to think about whether they're current enough. An impactful resume. How do you create one? A resume should be both descriptive and results-oriented. The results should be those that occurred as a result of you being in the job or decisions you made or you led your teams to make. And also, what skills did you use to achieve these results? For example, did you manage large teams? Did you lead matrix teams that didn't report to you? Did you manage a P&L or a budget? I find that a lot of relaunchers choose to change functions or industries when they go back to work. So again, it's critical to highlight transferable skills and make sure you have the current and relevant lingo for the industry. Because if you're concerned about ageism, not having the current lingo or a current interviewing style are some factors that can show your age more. I recently coached a relauncher whose first career was in consulting for consumer goods clients. She wanted to change from consulting to a marketing career at consumer goods companies. As a consultant, she did a lot of what they call SWOT analysis, which some of you may know. It's really a strategic approach to competitive analysis. It's used by many companies, but particularly by consulting firms. Since she's applying to consumer goods companies, I suggested that instead of using the SWOT term on her resume, she change it to competitive analysis, which is the lingo that's used in consumer goods companies. Also, to be current, if you used to be in customer service, the current lingo is customer engagement. So it's important to have the right lingo and the current lingo. Interviewing with confidence. I find that a challenging area for relaunchers is interviewing because you probably have not been on an interview in a long time. So how do you build confidence for your interview? I find that relaunchers often have a boost in self-confidence when they write their new resume. Writing your resume will remind you of your accomplishments from your first career. It will also help you to reconnect to your former professional self. Going on networking meetings is a good way to start interviewing because networking meetings are usually with someone you know or a friend of a friend, so it's friendlier and a more forgiving audience. This will help you to build more confidence talking about your professional self, and you should be firm about your readiness to relaunch. You should say, I'm ready to relaunch my career, or I'm ready to return to my career and I'm interested in doing X. Going on interviews can also be intimidating if you're not sure of how to present yourself in terms of how to respond to questions. It's important to craft a compelling description of your former career and a logical transition to what you want to do next. For example, you can say, I had a 12-year career in consulting. I focused on the retail industry. I then took a career break to raise a family. I'm now interested in leveraging my strategy and retail experience to join an online retailer, which, by the way, is a growth industry. I'm interested in strategy, corporate development. Interviewing can also be challenging if you're unsure of how to answer the questions. When I work with clients, I usually send them a list of interview questions they can anticipate receiving and target it to relaunchers. This usually covers about 90% of the questions they will be asked. And I ask them to develop written responses, especially for the difficult questions, and then we work together to make them more compelling. And then we do a lot of mock interviews so they come across natural and confident. Preparing in advance will help you to feel more confident. One of the hardest questions for relaunchers is when they're asked, why did you take a career break? Remember that the interviewer is usually not interested in the actual reasons of why you stopped working, because in reality, everyone's reasons are very personal to their personal situation. The interviewer is actually assessing your decision-making and critical thinking skills. She is wondering if you made a planned, well-thought-out decision. She's thinking, did you plan your decision thoughtfully? Did you consider the impact? Did you think about the long-term implications? Did you have a re-entry strategy? So try to position your decision as a strategic, planned, and well-informed one. You can say, I always planned to take a career break when my children were young. I planned to return to work when they started middle school. My strategy for a smoother re-entry was to stay current in the industry with colleagues and professional meetings. I know that X event has occurred in the industry in recent years, which had a big impact. I'm returning to my career now, and I'm interested in doing X. Please avoid saying, I could not commit 100% to both my career and my family, or it was too hard to juggle a career and my family. Even if that may be your reason for stopping work. because you don't know your interviewer's situation. Your interviewer is obviously working full time and maybe raising a family too. He could have a spouse who is doing both. You don't want to be caught in that trap. There's also no reason to mention how long a break you took. It will be on your resume, so there's no need to remind them. How about if you're asked, how have you kept current during your career break? You can say, I kept up with the industry by staying in contact with former colleagues, reading publications, and attending industry meetings. But you can prove it by citing something specific that occurred in the industry during your break. You can talk about the creation of the Dodd-Frank Act, or you could speak more broadly about how companies in many industries are facing shareholder pressure to divest of fossil fuel investments, or how activist shareholders have impacted company strategies and often the leadership and composition of their boards. You should be proactive in talking about how current you are, even if the interviewer doesn't bring it up, because you can be pretty sure that the interviewer will be wondering if you are current. Then you have to rehearse a lot and do a lot of mock interviews. Now it's time for us to wrap up, so we'll have some time for questions. Let's summarize what we covered today. Make sure your new career fits with your current life and values. Make your career narrative strategic and succinct. Get current with online research, publications, and friends. Get project-based work to update your work experience. Fill in your career gap with consulting. Address ageism by owning it with confidence. Network effectively with a list of target companies. Prepare for interviews with a compelling career narrative and a list of anticipated questions and answers. Do mock interviews so you can get feedback and improve, and get the support you need to build confidence throughout the process. In my experience with relaunches, I find that working together to build confidence is a very, very important part of their relaunch. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left for some questions. Adam will be selecting questions that are of interest to multiple participants. So if we don't get to your question, you're welcome to contact me through my website or my email, which is on this slide. From previous webinars, I found that some of the questions may be relevant to others. So if you send in your questions by next Friday, January 25th, I'll be happy to collect all the questions and answers and send them out to anyone who may be interested in receiving them. So if you would like to get a copy of the list of questions and answers, just send me your email. Both my website and my email are on this slide. And of course, for privacy, I will not disclose the names of the people who asked the questions if you email me. So thank you. Adam, we're now ready for Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Margaret. So our first question comes from an individual who states, I've taken a break from paid full-time work, but I've continued to work in the form of full-time, high-level volunteer work. Currently, I'm president of an advisory board with more than 300 volunteers. Is this something I could put on my resume in the experience section? Since it is my most recent, it would be at the top of the list of experiences. So would you suggest in the experience section as opposed to a volunteering section?
Definitely in the business section. That's terrific experience, serving as an advisor.
Great, thank you. And another kind of follow-up to that question, what do you think of temp work as a means of re-entering the workforce? Might it present the opportunity to network within a company and find an appropriate position? What are your thoughts about this idea alongside returnships and some of the other things that you've discussed?
In terms of, that's a very good question. And and I want to be clear about this. Temp work is good if it's professional work. For example, if you're going to be an executive assistant, that's fine if your plan for the career you want to target for your relaunch is also an executive assistant role. From what I have seen, if you are a temp in executive assistant role, it's very hard to move out of an EA role into a management type job. But if it's But if it's a temporary role, for example, someone's on a professional who's on maternity leave, and they need an interim or a temp marketing manager or a CMO or chief marketing officer, terrific.
All right, great, thank you. This next question, I think, is kind of harkening back to an earlier slide. I think at the beginning of the presentation, you had mentioned P&L management, and this attendee was wanted clarification on what P&L means, that terminology.
I'm sorry, that's profit and loss. So, for example, if you were responsible for generating revenues, and you were also responsible for managing the expenses, that means you were then responsible for the net profit of the business. So that's profit and loss management of a business generally.
Great, thank you. Our next attendee question has a friend who is planning a short one-year career break, but hasn't started it yet. Any recommendations around what this person could do or should be doing during this break to make their relaunch easier?
Actually, this question is one I would appreciate if the person could email me, because I wrote an article for Working Mother magazine. In fact, you could probably Google, actually, let me take it back. They could just Google the article. I wrote it in June, and it's seven things women should do now before they go on their career break. If this participant, if you cannot locate it, then email me and I'd be happy to direct you to it. But you can just Google it.
Great, thank you. Another attendee has been doing freelance and consulting work for years while raising a child and is now looking for regular employment. They would like to know whether returnships are an option for them. I think you had mentioned that returnships typically require time away from work. So if you've been doing freelance and consulting work, are you still eligible? I think is the question.
Generally, you're eligible as long as you are not an employee of a company. And usually the gap is 2 years, meaning you need to have not been an employee for 2 years at a company. And those reasons are related to childcare. In other words, it can't be someone who lost their job and took 2 years to find a job. They can't apply for these returnships. But in this person's case, if they did freelance work and was never an employee of a company within the past 2 years, then generally you can apply for the returnships.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try, this is a longer question, so I'm going to try and put it to you as best I can. If you need clarification, please let me know. This attendee says that they went back to school and got their MBA in healthcare administration in 2011 and a second emphasis in international business, which I guess was the equivalent of 2 more classes in 2014. Should I, her question are, use both or tailor to the situation, and 2, use my GPA for this and my undergrad? So they're saying the agency that they worked for has had them take the year and GPA off on their resume, but based on your suggestion, they're going to at least put the years back on. But I think the question is, should they include GPA, and how to kind of include both education focuses, I guess. It's a longer question.
Okay, to be honest, this question is hard for me to answer because I don't understand the context. So why don't you email me directly, and I'm happy, and send me your resume, and that way I can understand the context of your question. I'm happy to answer it.
Great, thanks for that suggestion. Do you have any other suggestions for someone who would like to relaunch through project and or part-time work for specific companies in their city? So you mentioned a few firms, and if so, should this person state this on their resume or discuss later in the interview process? This person mentions that they're in a Western state where there are very few of the formal relaunch programs that you mentioned.
Okay, first of all, I had mentioned that many of these returnship programs are not restricted to just the company's headquarters. So for example, even if companies in New York, they could have returnship locations on the West Coast. So I just want to be clear about that. Second of all is that it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, this person is looking for part-time work instead of full-time work. Is that what it sounds like?
That's what it sounds like. Yep.
Okay. 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 Let me, okay. Part, companies do not, part-time jobs is a strategy that companies use for retention. They don't use it for recruiting. And what that means is it's not as if there is a part-time job that this company says, oh, we have a part-time job. Let's post this job and see who we can hire. Often part-time management or professional jobs are created to retain someone who they don't want to leave, who is a high performer. So usually what happens is a professional says, I can't work full-time for whatever reason, I'd like to convert to part-time, or I want to quit. And in which case, the company says, you know what, we love you so much, we want you to stay, and we'll create a part-time job for you. So it's a retention strategy. So it's very rare when a company goes to the outside and actually hires someone into a professional job that's, of reasonable responsibilities from the outside. So I always suggest to people, to clients who are interested in part-time jobs, apply for the full-time job, do a fabulous job, make so that you're indispensable to them, and then you negotiate for part-time. It is really difficult to try to get a part-time job as an outsider coming into a company.
Great, thank you. We've got a few attendees that have asked kind of a variation of this question, which is if they don't have a lot of an extensive amount of work experience prior to their break, what would their relaunch strategy look like, or how do they articulate that? The discussion so far seemed to highlight people who had quite a bit of experience prior to relaunching.
First of all, with returnships, it's totally fine to apply to those, even if you've only had maybe 5 to 10 years of experience, or maybe even less than 5 years. Perhaps you worked a couple of years and then took a couple of years off. That's not a problem with returnships. So don't be discouraged by that. You should still apply to those. And second of all, is that one of the issues when you don't have that much experience is figure out what you want to do next, because you don't have as much experience to look back upon and be exposed to. So I think the self-discovery and self-reflection and self-assessment of your strengths is really important. And whether you choose to do that with friends or with a coach, I think that part is really important in the beginning of your relaunch.
Great. We're going to try and fit in one last question if you're up for it, Margaret. I know we're getting close to the end of our hour here, but this is a good one, I think, to end with. And others, we didn't get to all of our questions, but Margaret was gracious enough to say that feel free to reach out if you have those questions. But this last one, could you strategically position a career break to support one elderly parent and then another in the same way as taking a break to start a family? So if your reason for taking the break is not necessarily to raise children, but to care for an elderly parent, how would you position that?
That's a very good question, and I'm sorry that when I in my presentation that I wasn't more clear. When I say, I know I said raise a family, but it's actually any kind of family-related reason. It could be elderly parents. It could be a spouse with a disability. So it could be any of those reasons. And the returnships are also, it's about any kind of family leave that you took from your career, which could be children, or it could be elderly parents, or someone sick in your family.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for participating. A special thank you to Margaret for sharing her expertise on this important topic. Those of you who've been following along with our programming in January know that it's been a busy month, which continues next week with 2 webinars. The first on Tuesday, January 22nd, entitled The Power of Mentorship, an Alumni Panel Discussion, and the second on Thursday, January 24th, on the 5-part magic formula to land a promotion. We hope you can join us for one or both of these events next week. And to see our most up-to-date schedule of events, you can visit our events page at careers.uchicagoalumni.org. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.